Hello and welcome to the Comic Atlas. This is the series where we talk about the complete history of comic book characters. Today we're going to continue our journey through the pages of Amazing Spider-Man with some classic stories. We're covering issues 6 to 10 of the first volume of The Amazing Spider-Man from late 1963 to early 1964, so keep on those Silver Age pipes swinging. We start with issue 6 where Spider-Man will face the half-human, half-reptile menace baptized as the Lizard. We open as we go to the Everglades where a giant lizardman is terrorizing the locals. Word spreads out as the Daily Bugle challenges Spider-Man to go and catch the creature. Peter fails to convince J. Jonah Jameson to send him down south and report and possibly resolve the situation. In any case, it's back to action for the wall crawler as he saves Liz Allen and his classmates from a group of burglars. Spider-Man figures he can tease Jameson to send him down to Florida and he succeeds. Promptly, both Peter and Jonah are taking a flight to have a date with the Lizard. Now in Florida, Peter brushes off Jonah, gets his costume and starts searching for the reptile. He founds the reptile, but they only trade some soft blows. Coincidentally, Peter gets to hear a woman cry and thus we learn the tragic story of the Lizard. This woman is the wife of Dr. Curtis Connors. Dr. Connors is a great guy all around whose only impediment is having lost one of his arms. To try to grow it back, he creates and drinks a serum based on reptiles as they can grow limbs back. Everything seems to be working as his arms regrow, but suddenly he grows scales and turns green as the lizard persona takes over his body and mind. Using his science knowledge, Peter creates his own formula to counteract the effects of the original serum. She promises Miss Connors that he'll rescue Kurt without damage. We learn that the lizard is planning to take control of every reptile in the world in its path to becoming ruler of Earth. Spider-Man cuts him cold and dispatches his crocodiles and snakes. Inside the tower, the battle between the Lizard and Spider-Man ensues. The confrontation ends with the Lizard being forced to drink the formula and returning to being Curtis Connors. At this moment, a bond between Spider-Man and Dr. Connors is formed that will help Peter in the future. Even though he was able to take photos, Jameson dismisses them as fake as they make their way to New York City. Next, we catch a glimpse at the return of the Vulture. It turns out the Vulture is an great inmate as he develops another flying machine inside jail and escapes. When Peter hears of the news, the Vulture is already on another crime spree. When they battle again, Peter is surprised that his old device won't work against the Vulture's new wings. This results in Peter taking a huge dive in a New York rooftop. Breaking his arm, Peter makes his way home and convinces both his Aunt May and his classmate that it was a petty accident. Outside of New York, the Vulture is already planning a new scheme as he puts his eyes on the office of the Daily Bugle. He attacks the newspapers, but he doesn't know that the one, Peter Parker, happens to be there. As he changes into Spider-Man, the Daily Bugle building develops into complete chaos. The offices are trash, as are the presses. Even though his arm is broken, Spider-Man proves to be more than a match for the Vulture in these enclosed spaces. Finally, the battle is taken outside where the Vulture should have the upper hand. But Spider-Man is much too clever and uses his webbing to neutralize the Vulture's wings and force him to surrender. Despite saving the day, Jonah still blames the webhead, prompting him to shut him down with some good old webbing. The story ends with Peter and Betty Brant having some romantic alone time in the great Daily Bugle. In issue 8, Peter gears up to face both Flash Thompson and the Living Brain. The first scenes show Flash being an asshole towards Peter and breaking his glasses. As Peter can't take this abuse anymore, he stands up for himself as they both pledge to finish their fight after class. Before they can come to blows, their school lecture starts as we are introduced to the Living Brain. This machine is supposed to have the greatest mechanical brain ever and be able to answer any question it is asked. The class decides to ask the Living Brain who is Spider-Man as Peter sweats out in panic that he will blow his cover. Luckily for him, said answer has to be decoded, giving him time to think of a way out and turns his attention to Flash. They decide to face each other in a boxing match at the gym. Peter uses his spider strength to wipe the floor with Flash, even though his classmates think Thompson is only joking around. Whilst this is happening, some burglar is trying to steal the machine, but fails and send it into overdrive. Now it's time for Spider-Man to stop the brain, which is easier said than done as he is fighting a pretty smart machine. After doubling for a couple of pages, Spider-Man is able to switch off the machine, avoiding any damage to the school. However, once again, it's Flash Thompson who gets the standing ovation as he trips the burglars and quote-unquote saves the day. Peter sees the opportunity to suggest that Flash must be Spider-Man, taking the hit out of himself as he claims to have lost the code provided by the Living Brain. We have a second story in this issue. It's an out-of-character tale in which Spider-Man annoys the Human Torch and the Fantastic Four. The least said the better, just teenagers trying to upend one another. In issue 9, we meet the Master of Electricity, Electro. We see Spider-Man rushing through the city as he's bringing medicine to a very ill Aunt May. We cut to a green and orange costumed guy that is called Electro, and watch as he shoots lightning to rob a shipment of gold. Elsewhere, Peter is forced to intern Aunt May in the hospital and ponder how to get the money for the surgery she so badly needs. The monk called Electro attacks once again, this time in a bank where Jameson is. The event brings attention to Electro and makes Peter realize that he can make some bucks by catching the new villain, in the process snapping some pictures for the Bugle. Peter is unprepared and rushes to battle with Electro, who shocks him and leaves him for dead. Of course, thanks to his spider powers, Peter survives, but he's forced to forge some photos of Electro and himself to take some dough from Jameson. We are then shown Electro's backstory. He was an electric lineman called Max Dillon. Even in those days, he was a conman on the job. One day, he got hit by lightning, but instead of dying, he got the ability to manipulate electricity. Realizing his potential, he made a costume for himself and entered a life of crime. His next plan is to break into a prison and use the escapees as his personal pawns. Peter, however, is pinned down at the hospital as he waits for Aunt May's surgery. After a couple of hours, the procedure is successful and Spider-Man is free to go. However, Betty Brant now fears for Peter Parker. The photographer seems to be enjoying the adventurous life a bit too much for her liking. Inside prison, it's now Spider-Man on the offensive. He's now fighting Electro with rubber gloves, ensuring that the villain cannot escape his punches. Ultimately, Spider-Man is able to use a hose and short-circuits Electro into unconsciousness, taking some photos of the process. Even though his relationship with Betty took a hit, his aunt is now safe and the money from the Beagle keeps coming. A nice day for Peter overall. The last issue we're gonna cover today is issue number 10. Even though it's a round number, it's a wholly unremarkable story. Spider-Man faces the dull big man who in reality is this Bugle columnist named Foswell, along with his dumb enforcers. Lame stuff really. The only good thing in this issue is Spider-Man reacting to finding out Jameson is not the big man. Pretty solid stuff this week, to be honest. The Electro, Lizard and Vulture stories were pretty nice as we get into more of their backstories. The Living Brain story was kinda meh, and the enforcers did nothing for me. Peter's relationship is starting to flourish, but it's quite clear Barry Brandt is hiding something big. Peter is still showing his capabilities, as he for the most part faces villains that are credible threats to his powers. At the same time, seeing Peter rise above the struggles of his personal life is nice and makes a wonderful character to cheer for. Anyway guys, that's it for today. Don't forget to leave a like, share and subscribe below. This is the Comic Atlas, and I wish you all a nice existence.